Gary Hayes watched, jaw tight, as Dale Peterson's hand slid a little too far down Brenda's back, right there through the glass wall of his corner office. A cold knot twisted in Gary's gut, the silent betrayal searing. Brenda's eyes, wide and trapped, met his for a split second before Dale leaned in, whispering, a smirk playing on his lips. Some things are just meant to be. Gary Hayes was in his office, the glass wall giving him a clear view of the open-plan marketing area. The fluorescent lights hummed with a low, steady drone that usually faded into the background, but tonight it felt like a buzzing behind his teeth. He watched, jaw tight, as Dale Peterson's hand slid a little too far down Brenda Hayes's back. Not a friendly pat, not a casual touch. It lingered, a possessive weight, right there through the glass. Brenda was talking to a client, her smile fixed, a little too wide, like a mask. Dale stood too close, his head bent, as if sharing a secret only they knew. A cold, hard knot formed in Gary's gut, tightening with each beat of his own pulse. He thought back to their college days, to Brenda buzzing with an almost electric excitement about her dream job at Evermedia. She talked about breaking stories, about the impact, the challenge. Her eyes used to shine when she spoke of it, a vibrant, hopeful gleam. Now, that shine was gone, replaced by something duller, worn. Lately, Brenda had been pulling back, a subtle shift he hadn't fully registered until now. She stayed late at the office, the reason always vague, always about a deadline, a campaign that needed just one more look. Her phone was a constant companion, held tight in her hand, alerts vibrating through the quiet evenings. Sleep had gone from her eyes, leaving dark smudges beneath them, a perpetual tiredness that even a weekend couldn't shake. She moved through their small house like a ghost, distant, like a storm brewing just off the horizon, promising something difficult he couldn't yet name. He'd found her once, just 2 weeks ago, at 2 a.m. She was sitting in the living room, a single lamp casting long shadows, staring at an untouched glass of wine. "Everything all right?" he'd asked, his voice soft, careful. She'd jumped, a startled bird. "Nothing's bothering me," she'd said, too quick, about the Carter campaign she was managing. Her words hung in the air, thin and unconvincing. He'd let it go, then, telling himself it was just the stress of the hum, the pressure. He'd wanted to believe it. A week later, the call came, a little after 4 on a Tuesday afternoon. Her voice was thin, edged with panic. She needed her laptop. "Left it at home, Gary. I need it now. This presentation is tomorrow." He didn't ask questions. He just grabbed her bag, her charger, and drove it right over just like he always would. He was her husband. That's what you did. That's when he saw it again. The hand. Dale Peterson leaning against the doorframe of Brenda's cubicle, not even bothering to look casual. His hand was on her arm now, a light squeeze, before it drifted lower. Brenda's smile was a fragile thing, her shoulders hunched, a posture entirely unlike her usual confident stance. She was usually the one who held her head high, met every gaze. Now she seemed to shrink into herself, almost disappearing behind her monitor. He knew clear as a bell, in that precise moment, something was terribly wrong. His wife, his Brenda, was carrying a heavy weight, something she couldn't or wouldn't share. It was a cold truth, heavier than any lie. That night, in the dark quiet of their bedroom, the city sounds muffled by closed windows, Gary asked, quiet-like, "What's going on with Dale Peterson?" The question felt like a stone dropping into a still pond. Brenda just shook. A silent tremor that ran through her body, then a choke sound, and the tears started, hot and fast, soaking into the front of his old t-shirt. Then it all came out, a torrent of clipped words, punctuated by ragged breaths. The compliments, too frequent, too personal. The way Dale would stand a little too close, invade her space, always finding an excuse. The lunch invitations that felt more like summons, always to out-of-the-way places, always just the two of them. She told him about the time Dale had blocked the door to the conference room after everyone else had left. He dangled a promotion, a big one, talking about personal connections and going the extra mile, and what that really meant. He hadn't said it outright, but the meaning was clear, heavy in the air between them. Then, the supply closet. Her voice dropped to a whisper, barely audible. The way Dale had cornered her, how he'd closed the door, the click echoing in the sudden silence. She thought, for a terrifying moment, he was going to force himself right there among the stacks of paper and toner cartridges. Her breath caught in her throat, a dry gasp, until someone walked by, their footsteps loud in the hallway, pulling open the closet door by mistake, interrupting whatever awful thing was about to happen. Dale had just smiled, a practiced, easy grin, as if he'd simply been showing her where the new legal pads were kept. Gary's fists clenched at his sides, knuckles white, digging into the mattress. "We need to report this guy now," he growled, the words thick with a raw, protective anger. To the police if we have to." Brenda just laughed, a bitter, hollow sound that held no humor. "To who? Barb in HR is his golf buddy's wife. Everyone knows that. It'd be my word against his. He's been there for 20 years. He's got a reputation. I'm just new talent." She paused, her voice shaking. "Besides, what about Patty and Ruthie? Other women, Gary. They've had similar brushes. Everyone whispers about him, but no one dares to speak aloud." Gary pulled her close, his arms tight around her, her tears dampening his shirt. The dampness a cold burn against his skin. He held her, feeling the tremble in her small frame. "We'll find proof," he promised, his voice rough with determination. "You ain't alone in this. Not anymore." Sunup saw Gary Hayes over coffee, the mug warm in his hands, explaining his wild idea to Brenda. It was a plan hatched from a sleepless night spent wrestling with worry and a cold, simmering anger that felt like ash in his mouth. The kitchen light was dim, the air still cool with morning chill, but his words felt charged, urgent. He laid out the details, crude but direct, of what they needed to do. Brenda's face was a shifting landscape of emotions. Fear, pure and sharp, tightened the lines around her eyes, but beneath it, a hard-earned resolve began to set, like concrete hardening. She took a slow breath, her gaze meeting his across the Formica table. "Let's do it," she said, her voice thin but steady, surprising them both with its strength. There was no turning back now. That afternoon, Gary found himself in a dusty electronics shop downtown. The air inside smelled of solder and old circuitry. The owner, a thin man with glasses perched on his nose, seemed used to requests for items slightly outside the mainstream. Gary walked out with a tiny camera, no bigger than his thumb, disguised as a decorative turtle, its green shell textured, its small, bead eyes unblinking. It even had a tiny fake suction cup on its belly, meant for a fish tank. "They got that big aquarium in the common area, right?" he explained to Brenda later that evening, holding the plastic turtle up, its innocent facade almost comical. "Near the break room. Nobody's going to look twice at a turtle. It'll just blend in with the rest of the fake plants and rocks." The camera lens was a pinprick, almost invisible, nestled in the turtle's side. It recorded video and audio, its battery good for several hours. Brenda's hands trembled as she took the little thing, her fingers fumbling with the tiny power switch Gary had shown her. She practiced turning it on and off, her movements jerky, her fear still plain to see in the way her lower lip quivered. She looked at the turtle, then at Gary, her eyes wide. "What if he finds it?" she whispered, the question loaded with all her anxieties. "It's just decor," Gary reassured her, his voice low, trying to project a calm he didn't quite feel. He covered her hand with his own, pressing down gently. "Even if he does, so what? Ain't it illegal to have a plastic turtle in an office aquarium? It's just a silly ornament. We're not doing anything wrong. We're just making sure there's a record." He didn't say of what. They both knew. The next morning, Gary watched her leave, her shoulders squared, a new kind of tension in her walk. A few minutes later, his phone buzzed in his hand. "Turtle is swimming," Brenda's text read. A pause. "Wish me luck." The simple words held a weight of courage and trepidation that made his chest ache. 3 agonizing days crawled by. Each evening, Brenda came home, drained but with no new incidents to report. Dale Peterson was unusually restrained, it seemed. He stuck to group meetings, kept his distance, his usual casual touches, and lingering gazes absent. Brenda found it unsettling, the quiet before the storm. It was as if he knew they were watching, or perhaps he was just playing a longer game. The turtle recorded hours of mundane office life, The hum of conversation, the clatter of keyboards, the whir of the coffee machine. Nothing incriminating. Then, on the fourth day, a Thursday, the text came, just after lunch. He wants me to stay late, just us, Carter numbers. Carter? Says he needs to go over the final presentation. Brenda's stomach clenched reading the message. She could feel the familiar cold dread spreading through her. Gary's own gut twisted into knots. A hot, sick feeling rising in his throat. This was it. The waiting was over. He texted back, "Okay, I'll be there. Waiting outside around 7. Keep your phone on, just in case." He didn't know what just in case meant, but the words felt necessary, a tether of reassurance. He was parked by 6:30 p.m., 2 blocks from the Ever Media building, tucked away in the shadows of an alley behind a dry cleaner's. The sky was a bruised purple, dusk settling over the city, the office towers starting to light up, squares of yellow and white against the deepening blue. He stared up at the 14th floor windows, trying to pinpoint Brenda's office, his heart a frantic drum against his ribs. The silence in his truck was heavy, broken only by the hum of the idling engine. At 6:55, Brenda's call came through. He answered immediately, his voice tight. "Brenda, you all right?" He heard the faint hum of the office through the phone, the distant sound of an elevator dinging. Then Dale Peterson's voice, smooth as pond water, cutting through the background noise. It was close enough to Brenda's phone to be clear, almost as if Dale were in the truck with him. "Brenda, really excellent work on the Carter account," Dale was saying, his tone oozing professional admiration, but with an undertow of something else, something cloying. "The presentation you put together, simply outstanding. You're a standout, truly." Gary gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white. He could almost picture Dale's smile, the one that never quite reached his eyes. "That's why," Dale continued, his voice dropping slightly, becoming more intimate, "I think you're ready for the senior marketing strategist position. A significant step up. Substantial pay raise, of course." He let the words hang in the air, bait on a hook. Then came the real hook. "Perhaps over dinner this weekend. A fantastic little place I know. Very private. We could discuss your future in detail. My treat, naturally." "That's not necessary." Brenda's voice cut through the phone line. Cooler now, carefully professional. Gary could hear the practiced politeness, the wall she was putting up. "We can discuss any career advancements during business hours, Dale. I'm sure HR would prefer that." Dale Peterson's chuckle held an edge, a hint of irritation beneath the smooth veneer. "Some conversations are better had away from the office, Brenda. Away from prying ears, you know. Over a good bottle of wine, perhaps. A celebration of your obvious talent. My treat, of course." The invitation was laced with a sickly sweetness, a trap disguised as generosity. "I appreciate the offer, Dale, I truly do. But I don't think dinner's appropriate," Brenda insisted, her voice tight, a fine thread holding her composure together. Gary could feel her tension even through the speaker of his phone. He imagined her standing there, probably clutching her phone, trying to appear unruffled. Gary gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white against the dark plastic. The mention of his name and the 30% pay increase made his blood boil, a hot rush of anger. Dale was trying to use him, use their shared future as leverage. It was a dirty trick, and it worked, tightening the knot in Gary's stomach even further. Dale pushed harder, his voice dropping, becoming a low murmur that was almost intimate, almost conspiratorial. "We're talking about your career, Brenda, a very significant step. Don't you want to advance? Wouldn't you and Gary appreciate that for your future? Think about what a difference that kind of increase would make." He paused, letting the numbers, the implied future, hang heavy in the air. Brenda stood her ground. Gary could almost see her squaring her shoulders even though he was miles away. "I prefer to earn advancement based on my work, Dale. On my merits and contributions, not other considerations." Her voice held a barely perceptible tremble, but the resolve was clear. A long silence stretched, heavy and thick, through the phone line. It was the kind of silence that feels like a threat, pregnant with unspoken meaning, with the weight of consequence. Gary held his breath, every muscle in his body rigid. "You know, Brenda," Dale's voice finally came back, slow and deliberate, each word measured. Opportunities like these don't come around often. Not for everyone. He didn't have to say it, but the implication was clear. Cold as ice. Turn him down, and her career at Evermedia would hit a wall, promotions drying up, opportunities disappearing. She would be blacklisted, relegated to the sidelines, her talent ignored. "I understand, Dale," Brenda finally said, her voice barely a whisper, a strategic surrender that cost her dearly. Gary could hear the defeat, the calculated retreat, even as he knew it was necessary. "I'll consider what's best for my career." He heard Dale grunt, a sound of satisfaction, of a predator getting what he wanted, even if not immediately. Then the line went dead. Brenda had hung up. Gary waited, tense as a fiddle string, watching the glass doors of the Evermedia lobby. Time stretched, an unbearable minute passing before he saw her finally emerge, a small figure in the vast, brightly lit space. She walked with a stiff, unnatural gait, her purse clutched tight. She slid into the passenger seat of his truck, the soft sigh of the door closing a muted thud in the quiet. Her face was pale, almost translucent in the dim light of the dashboard, and she was trembling, a fine shiver running through her. But her eyes, though red-rimmed and exhausted, held a spark, a grim satisfaction that hadn't been there before. "It's on the turtle," she whispered, her voice hoarse, raw from the tension. The words were a weight lifted, but also a new one settled in, a heavier, more dangerous burden. The proof was there. Gary just nodded, his gaze fixed on the road ahead. He reached over, briefly covering her trembling hand with his own, a silent acknowledgement. He put the truck in gear, easing out of the alley. The hard part was over. The next, even harder, was about to begin. They had the evidence. Now they had to use it. Back home, the kitchen light casting long shadows across the linoleum floor, Gary carefully retrieved the little turtle from Brenda's bag. It felt heavier now, no longer a simple plastic trinket, but a vessel of hidden truths. The air in the house was thick with unspoken tension, the quiet louder than any noise. He set the turtle on the worn kitchen table, next to his old, clunky laptop. His fingers fumbled slightly as he connected the turtle's tiny USB plug to the laptop. The quiet hum of the machine, a familiar, steady sound, was a stark contrast to the pounding in his chest, a frantic beat against his ribs. Brenda sat beside him, her arm brushing his, her presence a silent anchor. They were side by side, silent, holding their breath as the tiny screen flickered to life. First the mundane, the wide-angle view captured office chairs, the glint of the water cooler, a few colleagues walking by, oblivious, talking about weekend plans or project deadlines. The camera had done its job, sitting there in the aquarium, just another piece of unnoticed decor. Gary fast-forwarded through the hours of innocuous footage, his finger hovering over the trackpad. Then he saw him. Dale Peterson entered the frame, smooth as ever, moving with an easy confidence. He sat across from Brenda at her desk, and the muffled audio of their conversation began to filter through the laptop's speakers. It was clearer than Gary had expected, catching the subtle inflections, the shifts in tone. They watched Dale's expression shift, the practiced smile, the subtle leaning in, the way his gaze lingered a moment too long on Brenda's face, then on her hands as she nervously adjusted a pen. Every word, every veiled threat, every insinuation was laid bare, stripped of the immediate, bewildering context of a live interaction. It was cold, impartial, undeniable. Brenda flinched, a small, involuntary movement, as she relived Dale's personal connection speech, hearing it again, seeing his face, his eyes, seeing it now through the cold, impartial lens of the camera, separated by time. It was even more chilling. The forced cordiality, the underlying menace was unmistakable. She saw the calculation in his eyes, the casual cruelty, the way he toyed with her. The camera, positioned perfectly in the aquarium, captured Dale blocking the door to Brenda's office, just as she'd described. His arms stretched across the doorway, leaning against the frame, effectively trapping her. The predatory glint in his eye, the slight curl of his lip. It was all there, undeniable. The conversation about her career, the opportunities. now took on a grotesque new meaning laid bare by the visual evidence. And then, the supply closet. The grainy footage showed Dale following Brenda in, then the swift movement of his hand to close the door, the soft click. Brenda's back was to the camera, but her sudden rigidity, the way her head snapped around, spoke volumes. The fear in her eyes was palpable, even in the low-resolution image, a terror Gary felt deep in his bones. He saw Dale lean in, his body language aggressive, domineering. He saw Brenda instinctively shrink away, pressing herself against the shelves of paper. Then the door opened, a coworker stepping in, looking for something, and the sudden jarring shift in Dale's demeanor, his quick, smooth recovery, the innocent smile. Every single interaction, every insidious manipulation, every calculated move was there, undeniable proof of his deceit and her torment. It wasn't just words anymore. It was a visual record, a silent witness. Gary hit pause, his jaw locked tight, a silent, seething fury burning through him. It was a cold fire, resolute, not explosive. "We have him," he said, his voice low, firm, the words heavy with certainty. "This is it." Brenda let out a shuddering breath, a long, drawn-out sound, a sob caught in her throat. The tears, held back for so long, finally began to fall, tracing paths down her pale cheeks. It was a mix of terror at what she had endured, and immense relief that it was finally out, finally real, finally recorded. She leaned her head against Gary's shoulder, her body shaking lightly. They watched it again and again, meticulously noting the timestamps, building their case frame by agonizing frame. They talked in hushed tones, pointing out gestures, confirming dialogues, the crisp audio, the clear visuals. It was all there, a brutal testament to Dale's true character, a man hidden beneath a polished corporate exterior. The cold certainty Gary had felt in the lobby, the quiet resolve he'd held, had been replaced by a fiery determination. They had the truth, unvarnished and irrefutable. Now they just needed to make it heard. The next morning, bright and early, the air still crisp with the promise of a sunny day, Gary and Brenda sat across from Mr. Jenkins. He was a lawyer, a friend of a friend, known for his quiet demeanor and sharp mind. His office was surprisingly spare, a single abstract painting on the wall, the only splash of color in a room of muted grays. "Mr. Your mom?" "Ah, yes, Jenkins listened intently as Brenda recounted her story, her voice, though still weary, holding a newfound firmness. He nodded slowly, his expression grim, as Gary connected his laptop and played the damning footage. The small screen became a window into Dale Peterson's insidious world. Mr. Jenkins watched, his eyes narrowed, absorbing every detail. "This is strong," he affirmed finally, his voice low and steady, a pronouncement that felt like a foundation beneath their feet. They decided to bypass Barb and her cozy HR department. There was no point in playing a game where the rules were rigged. Their aim was straight for the time, Evermedia's board. Mr. Jenkins wasted no time, leveraging his connections, pulling strings. A meeting was arranged, a tense affair held 2 days later in a polished, impersonal conference room on the 20th floor of the Evermedia building. Present were the company's CEO, Mr. Clark, a man with silver hair and a perpetually worried frown, and a couple of board members, their faces unreadable. Gary sat by Brenda's side, a silent, unwavering presence, his hand resting on her knee under the table. Brenda, her posture straight, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands, recounted her story once more. She spoke of the compliments, the lingering touches, the veiled threats. Her words, though calm, painted a vivid picture of manipulation and fear. Then, Mr. Jenkins presented the video evidence, the laptop connected to the large screen at the front of the room. The board watched, silent and stone-faced, as Dale Peterson's true colors splashed across the conference room screen. The moments Gary and Brenda had meticulously reviewed, the predatory glint, the subtle intimidation, the supply closet incident, all played out in stark, unblinking detail. The smooth, cultured voice of Dale Peterson, now stripped of its power in the sterile room, was exposed as a tool of coercion. Mr. Clark, the CEO, looked genuinely appalled, his face blanching. He assured Brenda, his voice firm, that such behavior would not be tolerated. Not in his company, not ever. By the end of the meeting, which lasted barely an hour, the decision was made. Dale Peterson was suspended, effective immediately, pending a full internal investigation. His reign of quiet terror, built on whispers and fear, had been brought to an abrupt and public halt. The air in the room, thick with corporate decorum and concealed shame, felt lighter, almost breathable. Word spread through the office like wildfire, faster than any official memo. The initial whispers about Dale's suspension quickly turned to open conversation. His name, once synonymous with power and untouchability, was no longer safe. The glass walls of the corporate hierarchy had shattered. Patty from graphic design, a quiet woman with kind eyes, and Ruthie from content, a sharp-witted woman who rarely held her tongue, both quietly approached Brenda in the days that followed. Their eyes, filled with a shared understanding and gratitude, spoke volumes. They didn't need to say much. Brenda knew. They knew. Dale, blindsided by the swiftness and incontrovertibility of the evidence, tried to deny it all. He claimed the video was doctored, a misunderstanding, a jealous employee out to get him. Anything to save his skin, to rebuild the carefully constructed facade. But the company's legal team, seeing the writing on the wall and fearing a much larger public scandal, launched a thorough internal investigation, interviewing dozens of employees. The dam broke. More women, emboldened by Brenda's courage, by the visible proof that they would be heard, stepped forward with their own stories. Accounts of similar compliments, uncomfortable advances, blocked doorways, and hushed threats began to pile up, painting a clear, disturbing pattern of abuse that had gone unchecked for years. Even Barb from HR, Dale's golf buddy's wife, found herself under the microscope. Her loyalty to Dale, her previous silence, was now a liability. Her carefully cultivated neutrality, deafening. The PR department went into overdrive, scrambling to contain the fallout, knowing this was a story that wouldn't stay quiet for long. The era of quiet tolerance was over. Life's choices often carry hidden costs, and the true price of standing up can be steep, but the cost of silence can be steeper. Stick around to the end to see how life's costly choices unfold. It wasn't long, just a week or so, before Ever Media released a public statement. Gary saw it on the local news ticker, then later in a terse email from Mr. Jenkins. Dale Peterson was terminated, effective immediately for gross misconduct. The words were clinical, devoid of emotion, but they hit Gary with a quiet force. Justice in its corporate form had been delivered. They also announced a complete overhaul of their HR policies, promising a safer, more transparent workplace. It was a concession, a public relations move, but it was also a tangible result of Brenda's courage. Change, however slow, was stirring. Barb, who had looked the other way for too long, was quietly let go. Her position, undermined by her allegiance to Dale and the stories that surfaced, became untenable. There was no public fanfare, just a discreet internal memo, but her absence left a noticeable void in the office hierarchy. Mr. Clark, the CEO, personally called Brenda. He offered her a new position, away from Dale's old team, a lateral move that was, in truth, an advancement in every way that mattered. His voice, when he spoke, held a sincere apology, heavy with the weight of his company's past failings. He offered support, resources, anything she needed. Brenda took a few weeks off, just to breathe, to let the dust settle, the emotional weight of what she'd endured and overcome, heavy but slowly easing. She spent her days walking, reading, sometimes just sitting in the quiet of their backyard, letting the sun warm her face. Gary was her rock, always there, steady as an old oak, helping her navigate the choppy waters after the storm. He didn't ask for much, just her presence, her peace. Wow. The local news picked up the story, a small-town expose of big city corporate corruption. It focused on Brenda's quiet courage, her refusal to be silenced, turning her into an unexpected local hero. The story resonated, a testament to the belief that even the powerful could be held accountable. Dale Peterson's gilded reputation, once so shining, was now tarnished beyond repair. His career, built on a foundation of deceit, lay in ashes. He became a cautionary tale, a name whispered in hushed tones, a symbol of professional downfall. Brenda eventually accepted the new offer. Not out of obligation or because she felt she had to. She still loved the work, the strategy, the creativity of marketing. But now it was on her own terms. The passion was still there, a flickering flame, but her spirit had a new, harder edge, honed by fire. Her priorities had shifted, like the seasons, valuing integrity and peace over ambition at any cost. Gary and Brenda found their marriage stronger, deeper. They'd faced down a dragon, a true test of their commitment, and their bond, forged in fire, was unbreakable. They started talking about a quieter life, maybe a small cabin up north, away from the corporate grind, a fresh start where the loudest sound would be the wind through the pines. Brenda even started volunteering at a women's advocacy center, helping other women who'd faced similar struggles, her own experience a beacon for them. The little turtle camera, the silent witness, now sat tucked away in a drawer, a stark reminder of what they'd overcome. Life in the Midwest slowly found its rhythm again for the Hayes family, forever changed, but with a new understanding of the true price of integrity. The air in the cabin up north was always cleaner, thinner, filled with the scent of pine and damp earth. Sometimes when the wind blew just right, Gary swore he could still catch a phantom whiff of office coffee and stale ambition. He watched Brenda from the porch, her hands busy in the small garden they had started. Her movements were fluid, unhurried. The lines of tension around her eyes had smoothed out, replaced by a quiet strength. The old life, the one where John Grayson's shadow loomed, felt distant, almost unreal. It had been a costly choice to fight, to stand up, to expose. It had cost them sleep, peace, and a piece of their naive belief in the fairness of things. But the new life, forged in that fire, felt earned. It was simpler, yes, but richer in its quiet honesty. Brenda had found her voice, not just for herself, but for others. Gary had found a deeper understanding of what it meant to protect, to support. The scars were there, subtle but undeniable. Yet they were reminders not of defeat, but of survival. The Midwest sun dipped below the tree line, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, a gentle ending to another day.